Biblical Dialectics Part 1 and Eden. This episode focuses on Eden as the birthplace of humanity, establishing the dialectical patterns of subsequent social development. We have considered the primary distinction between God and creation, the immaterial and material, spirit and matter. The dialectic is encapsulated in the Bible's first verse. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. It is important to repeat this foundational dialectic of God and creation. It sets out the order of things, fundamentally that spirit comes before matter. And as for matter, verse 1 identifies the three essentials of time, space and matter, each dependent on the other. No concept of time without space, no space without time, and so on. That the one verse is so packed with meaning reflects the Bible's concise descriptions of vast episodes. The biblical narrative begins with a God's eye view, comprising the whole universe, and over time, through a series of dialectical processes, the focus narrows from infinity to singularity. From the entire universe in Genesis 1, the biblical narrative zooms in on planet Earth, then the human race, then the Jews, finally centering on one individual, Christ. But first we must begin in Eden, in the age of innocence. We return to the initial dialectical triangle considered in the introduction. Man, that is to say, humanity, displays the biological dialectic of male and female. The binary gender begins in Eden, when God makes Eve as company for Adam. And that Adam needed company shows the dialectical tension in the first human's awareness of being alone in the world. For as Hegel emphasises in his own dialectics, the human is a social creature, perhaps reflecting God's sociability. God seeks a relationship, hence we are here. God's sociability reverberates through Adam, who being made in God's image reflects divine modes of existence. If male and female are viewed dialectically as thesis and antithesis, the synthesis would be the child, completing the necessary three parts of the traditional family unit: man, woman and child. Now, the materialist reduces reproduction to merely the propagation of a certain primate group, but spiritually speaking, human reproduction is the extension of divinity through the material realm. Only God creates ex nihilo, that is, from nothing. Humans can only create from existent material, but in sexual reproduction, the human creates a living soul, from, as it were, nothing. Nothing that is except the sexual act. This speaks to the often socially divisive importance that Christians place on sexuality and reproductive rights in a secularised and sexualised modern world. In the biblical model where individuals are images of God, life is eternal and sacred, and the child in its innocence reflects a purer form. And innocence marked Adam and Eve's existence in Eden. Presumably life was very different to our post-fall existence. It seems that man and God lived harmoniously. The dialectical pyramid shows that there is a metaphysical realm beyond human comprehension. For when I speak of the spiritual side of humanity, it's important to remember that this is confined to the human's limited conception of spirituality, which we see represented in the visible triangle. The dotted lines of the greater peak is the spiritual realm proper, unknown, or at least ineffable for those who have experienced it. Paul describes a third heaven, where unspeakable words were heard. It is from the mystery of this outer realm that the serpent of Genesis 3 materialises. It comes from the higher realm of antithesis, that which is not God, materializing into a voice against God in the physical realm, with the intention of willing humanity away from the spirit towards the flesh. The serpent draws Eve to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, a forbidden tree, which brings up the question of free will and the dialectic of freedom versus responsibility. The encounter with the snake also lays down the pattern of rebellion against God. The first point of attack on God is against his word. It was, after all, God's word that spoke matter into existence. Let there be light, and there was. The serpent's opening line is, "Yea, God says." This is a sarcastic swipe at God's character and human faith therein. Then as now, the materialist's first point of attack is God's word. Lev Shestov in Athens and Jerusalem emphasises the dialectical motifs of Genesis. This picture depicts the Garden of Eden's dialectical trees of knowledge and life, matching our dialectic between spirit and matter. For Shestov, sin is more epistemological than ethical. That is to say, the sin is not connected to Adam's disobedience. Rather, sin is in the knowledge itself, which rears the worrying proposition that he who knows the most sins the most. What does this say about our most revered intellects or our own pursuits of knowledge? Shestov's analysis mapped onto our dialectical pyramid shows that Jerusalem and Athens are synonymous with our spiritual and material domains. Shestov's Athens and Jerusalem itself is inspired by early church father Tertullian and highlights the dialectical conflict between faith and reason, pitching the prophets of the Bible against the philosophers of Greece and the subsequent European tradition, in a faith-reason debate that continues to this day and was initiated by events in Eden. God's curse in humanity involved immersion in the materialism they so desired. Eve is cursed by the prospect of pain and childbirth and subjection to her husband, while Adam will work hard and struggle to draw sustenance from an unyielding earth. Their disastrous immersion in materialism is finalised by the prospect of death. For dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. These curses imply that there was no toil or pain, no death before the fall. But after the fall, human access to infinity is destroyed by the finitudes of bodily processes and the anxiety of death, the cursed antithesis of life looming over the human being, a source of angst and fascination for existential philosophers. But what of the image of God that resides within us? This is the essence of ourselves. The material body withers and dies, but the spirit returns from whence it came. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. Recalling the initial dialectic of God and creation, we remember that we are first and foremost spiritual beings. Invisible entities that manifest sounds and movements in the world through our bodies. We are spiritual beings, but we must survive in an uncertain and often dangerous physical world for ourselves and for our children's sake. Consider the dialectical conflict between the past and the future. The fall entrenched this crucial dialectic of time in the human psyche. Time is a dialectic of past and future, synthesised in the present. In Eden, perhaps, they lived in perfect synthesis. But since the fall, humans are torn between the past and the future. Not only existentially in daily life, but politically, humans take the conservative or progressive path. This echoes Adam and Eve's longing to go back into paradise. But at the same time, they must leave home and move forwards into the future to survive in the material realm. We know they long to go back because a whirling, flaming sword was placed at the entrance to the garden to keep them out. A divinely imposed reality check on the desire of man to travel backwards in time. But as the common complaint goes, we cannot turn the clocks back. In this episode, I have highlighted a few of the crucial dialectics which emanated from Eden. As well as the familiar spiritual and material divide, we have considered many dialectical expressions, male and female, faith and reason, past and future. There is so much to say in the first few pages of Genesis, so many directions to go in that one could spend a lifetime studying it. My hope is that this episode has at least conveyed the impact that Eden plays in human history. Thank you for listening. Until next time, God bless.